Now it's time to introduce our two speakers. Robert Norland is the president of Association Reserves and a registered professional engineer. Robert is also a certified reserve specialist, was involved in creating National Reserve Day standards, and has greatly influenced this industry for the past 30 years. He regularly writes on the topic of reserve studies and speaks at industry functions throughout the nation. Association Reserves has prepared over 40,000 reserve studies for association-governed communities in all 50 states. Robert is often called to serve as an expert witness in litigation involving reserve issues. Since 1997, Julie Adamen has been president of Adamen, Inc., a consulting and employment firm specializing in the community management industry. Julie is also a nationally known author, publisher, speaker, and educator in the community association management industry. She is known for publishing the HOA Manager Newsline, an industry newsletter with a monthly circulation of over 17,000, and is the producer of the Manager Minute, a series of popular short videos now available on YouTube. And now I'd like to turn the floor over to Robert Norland. Robert?
Well, hello everyone, and thank you, Paige. Thank you everyone for joining us for today's webinar. Julie, can I get you to say hello, please?
Hello everyone, how are you doing today? And thanks for joining us.
Well, budgeting can be a pretty hazardous task. All year you're handling board members, owners, and the association's business partners, and that's great for those of you with great people skills. And every year you have a season of time when you go through a process of making some very important financial decisions that have significant financial consequences for the association's future, either in a good way or a bad way. And those decisions are usually very well documented in that budget process. So you want them to be wise, not foolish. And if your strength is working with people and not numbers, budgets can be very stressful. But next year and its expenses are going to come. So in today's session, we're going to arm you with some specific objectives, hazards to avoid, and helpful hints so you can steer your association towards a successful future, just like the sailors grabbing the wheel, with a grin on your face, confidently knowing where you're going, how you're getting there, and that you'll arrive safely even if the going gets a little bit rough. But first, a few notes about the session today. I hope you're ready to take some great notes. Actually, in the earlier session, I was taking notes because in preparation for this webinar, Julie and I felt like we had some great tips to share, the kind of training that isn't available anywhere else. But like all the webinars we do, we're recording this session. So it's going to be available by the end of the week on YouTube and the Association Reserves website for future playback. I believe the Adamen Inc. website also. Yes. Another resource is an outline that we're going to send to everyone who fills out a brief survey at the end of today's session. And finally, at the end of today's program, I'm going to direct you to some online resources to complement the session today. This is a live presentation, and everyone has been muted to keep the background noise to a minimum. But Julie and I need to hear from you. So if you came with a question, or if any time you have a question that arose due to something I've said, just type it in the dialog box in the control panel that you have. It appears like the one you see on screen. Paige is going to be monitoring that, and we'll draw from those for our Q&A session at the end of today's time. So let's check and see if you're ready to get started. Grab your mouse and click the little hands raised icon in your control panel that looks like the one you see on screen. So ready to go? Give me a hands raised. Very good. I see hands raised going up and down the list. Okay, great. I'm going to put hands down, and we're off to the presentation. So Julie, what are the attributes of a successful budget?
Well, I think the first attribute, which would be the most obvious to everyone, is that the community or the association has the cash it needs to function and operate in a safe and sane manner. They have money to pay bills, they have money to pay their vendors, they have money to fund reserves, very important, but they really just have money to function on a day-to-day basis without having to skimp or or say, no, we can't do that work until next month because we just don't have it this month. So that's really, really important, is to have that cash. And within that, one of the main things that happens with that is that board members, and believe me, I'm a board member myself. I want everyone to understand this. I'm even the treasurer on my own association. I don't know what was wrong with me at that moment, but I said yes, and I did it. So, our primary responsibility as board members is to, here are the buzzwords, preserve, protect, maintain, and enhance the community and the assets of the association. Preserve, protect, maintain, and enhance. That doesn't mean maintaining the status quo. We don't keep things static. We have to move the community forward. And the big problem with that, of course, for board members is that assessments naturally will have to go up over time. If your assessments aren't going up, something is wrong, unless you have gotten rid of some services or gotten rid of some assets. So understand that as board members, as hard as it is, it's our job to look at what needs to be done, understand how much it costs, and to make the assessments the right amount per owner accordingly. It's what we have to do. And then, Robert, did you want to say something there?
No, I think you handled it very nicely.
Okay, I heard you breathe in. Yeah. Go ahead.
Just moving the community forward and just dealing with the reality that it takes cash to run the association, just like your car requires gasoline. We require oxygen as people. Too many associations are starving their association of thriving because of a few dollars here and there. And it's that extra $5, extra $10 a month can really start to make the difference in a community that's thriving and one that is just withering on the financial edge.
Yes, absolutely. And one of the things we need to think about is that the owners, and I guess I'm an owner in my own association, I own a house in another association, and we have to pay the true cost of running that community. So if the board is not being forthcoming and this is what it costs for the services you want as an owner, or all of us want as owners or require as owners, then you're just basing your stuff on wishful thinking. And of course, the big sufferer of that are the reserves.
Right. That's a problem because so many board members don't see that or don't appreciate that the reserve components, all your reserve components, are deteriorating every day on an ongoing basis. Some get lulled into complacency thinking that if they only had very few reserve expenses this year, maybe just the pool furniture or something small, then their reserve needs are very light that year. Well, no, the reserve needs are constant and ongoing. It's just inevitable. So relentless is another word. So just be careful that you are making sure that you're dealing with the true cost, and that true cost has to do with the ongoing deterioration, not just the cash expenses that you're actually paying out of reserves.
Absolutely, absolutely. And everyone don't forget that the annual adjustments to assessments are normal and to be expected. So many board members, and believe me, I understand, but so many board members say, oh, well, we haven't raised assessments in 4 or 5 years. That's a badge of honor. It's not. Nothing gets cheaper. Nothing gets young. Well, I'm getting younger. I don't know about you, Robert, but I'm getting younger. Nothing gets cheaper. Nothing gets younger. Everything has to be maintained, brought up, or replaced, and none of that goes away. It's all a part of the job of a board member. So if you don't raise assessments incrementally, in the industry, we always recommend that communities raise assessments a small amount every year so the owners are used to that, because if you don't, what's going to happen is the poor board left 10 or 12 years down the road has to raise assessments the full amount. If it's 20% in your area, it's 20%, and special assess on top of it because there is such a budget shortfall. So not raising assessments is a stamp of failure. It's not a badge of honor, and we have to get away from that thinking. And the fourth part of that is that, the owners in the association have to be aware of where their dollars are going. One of the main things that happens with the owners is that they don't, they're not a part of your thinking process as a board member. They're not in your meeting. They're not in your budget meeting. You managers, that the owners are out there just, off in their world, and then a budget comes out and assessments go up $20, and whoa, everybody has a heart attack, and they don't know, and it creates this unrest. So the owners always need to be made aware of where their money is going. You do that through good, proactive communication. And hey, let's just talk about inflation for a second. I mean, what's the inflation rate? 3%? 4%? I mean, I know they say we're not having a lot of inflation, but I don't know if you've gone to the grocery store lately, but there's inflation. Or if you pay insurance, you know there's inflation. So anyway, the owners need to be aware. And if the owners are aware, well, let me ask, how do you make them aware? Well, communicate with them. Put it on the website. Put it in your newsletter. Hold an event where maybe the owners can come to it, whether it's a ice cream social or a Labor Day picnic or something where the board can interact with the owners, all of the owners, not just the 5 or 6 or 10 that come to the board meetings, and say, here's where we're at, here's what's going on, here's what this costs, and this is kind of where we're going as a board. We need to fund these things. And the more you communicate on that to your owners as a board member, the more proactive you look, the more proactive you are being, and it instills confidence in your leadership among the owners. It will quell that political problem that always arises when you talk about raising assessments. It's a problem.
Julie, I heard some real key words there. Openness, confidence, competence, those three kind of go together when you're talking about communication.
Yes, they go together when you're talking about homeowners associations, period.
Very good point. Well, for attributes of a successful budget, the main points is the cash to function, having the money that the association needs to survive and thrive, owners aware that they're paying their true cost on an ongoing basis through the time that they own a home at the association, build an expectation for annual adjustments so that it's not that big of a deal, it's not that big of a fight or an objection when it happens, and keeping the owners aware multiple times, multiple touch points through the year so that they understand the hard work that the board is putting in and how the board members understand that their money is going to assessments also. It's not that they're soaking the homeowners. They probably shed blood in those board meetings trying to keep the budget as tight as they can while still guiding the association in the future. Is that fair?
Absolutely, even more than fair.
Yeah, okay. All right, well, in addition to what budget success looks like, what's a successful process look like, Julie?
Well, I believe, and I am a proponent of, starting your budget about 6 months into the year for the following year. So if you have a fiscal year end of 12/31, start your budgets on June 1st. Now, all you managers out there, I can hear your eyeballs rolling back in your head. But if you have 6 or 8 or 10, or some people have 12 or 14 associations, and you start pulling out those figures, you start pulling out your year-to-date budget, you start looking at the budget from the previous year, so from June of, say, 2015 to June of 2016, that gives you a full year to look at. That's what I mean by starting your budget. You got to pull it together. You got to start looking and seeing what it is. And if you have 6 or 8 or 10 or 12 communities, you know how time-consuming this can be. You have to do phone calls, or you have to look on websites, you have to understand what the consumer price index is going to be when you're preparing these figures to give to your budget. And of course, things pop up in your day, you managers. You know that you can plan to do something on Tuesday, and you might not get to it till Monday of the following week because of all the emergencies and important things that pop up on your desk that you have to handle. That's why I say this long budget process. It'll cut your stress down, and it'll give you enough time to deal with all the other things you have to deal with. So also, when you prepare your preliminary budget, now Robert and I were just talking about this. So you get this information together in June, but by mid-July, which means mid-July to first part of August, really, you should have some sort of a budget, a preliminary budget to give to the folks you have to work with. It may be your board, but then again, it may have to go to the finance committee first, or the budget committee, or the treasurer, and they have to massage it and look at it and wrap their mind around what you have provided. So this process, again, takes time. Start early, and each of those folks has their own political process they have to go through with their group, which of course will affect your timeline even greater. So finish your budget or preliminary budgets out by end of July, 1st of August to the groups. And one other thing, it's very important. We do budgeting with a 12/31 fiscal year end. We do the budgeting in the summer, right? Is anyone around in the summer? Well, yeah, but not everybody at once. And if you live where you have snowbirds and your board members or budget committee members or the treasurer are out of state or out of the country at that time, well, that makes the process even longer. So starting early, getting it together, preliminary budget presentation around the 1st of August, that allows you to account for all of the machinations that go on through August and the first part of September. Follow up with all your folks, and you'll be able to publish it in the appropriate time frame.
Fantastic. Again, what I heard here was the keys. What's the keys to a successful process? Starting early, and that's 6 months in advance. And that doesn't mean that you're only dealing with preliminary information. Julie, that hint that you had there was go back a year and do a June to June or a May to May to get a full year's worth. Fantastic. And that is part of doing your homework, getting the numbers together. You may even have some notes about the things that hurt last year, the things that didn't get done, preparing that draft budget based on those notes, that homework, the year to date and the last 12 months. And then part of the process, I guess the last stage of the process is not even a numbers thing. It's just following up and drawing the project to a close.
That's right. That's right.
Cool. All right. So different elements to it. All right. Well, now that we've gone through the keys to success, what success looks like, how to do a successful process, let's talk about distractions. What are the key problems to avoid?
Well, not to beat this horse to death, but is that members of the board, especially newer members of the board who have maybe not been through these processes before, they have a mistaken goal to minimize assessments or minimize assessment changes. Even if the facts, the numbers, the real-time information and real-time financial information on the ground belies that thought process, they'll do it anyway. Your job as a board member, again, is as a trustee, as a fiduciary. It is not to keep assessments low, to keep the 10% of your super squeaky homeowners, the ones who are always there at your meetings and always browbeating you about something. It's hard, I know, because I sit in that chair. But your goal is for the community as a whole, not for those squeaky wheels. It's to budget realistically and not to keep assessments artificially low. And I'm going to add to this, Robert. I think I talked about it last time too, but here's one thing that's a good tip for board members. Remember, and managers as well, think about it this way. The homeowners, especially condominium owners, but homeowners are not attached to the budget like you are. So they send in their $200 a month assessments and they don't think, well, $80 goes for insurance and $20 goes for landscaping and $3 goes for management and $1 goes for reserve. They don't think that. They just know that they've written a check and off it goes. So you're attached to a process which they are not. So whenever they're like, well, where's our money going and this has gone up, they don't realize like you do that the insurance payments are going up, that workers' compensation is going up, so the landscaper has to charge more. It's always good to have that in the back of your head when you are explaining or writing, putting it on the website or in a newsletter about the budget process. They are not attached to it like you are. You wear it like a hair shirt. They don't wear it at all. They just write a check and it goes. So anyway, I'll just throw that part in there right now.
That's great.
Okay. And one of the other issues that we've talked about previously is the lack of institutional knowledge, and that happens in, or corporate knowledge, that it happens a lot in homeowners associations. And why is that? Well, board members rotate. Pretty much everybody serves one term of 2 years or maybe 2 terms of 2 years, and then they get out. And so what they knew goes with them. Maybe they move. Maybe they're just done. And I know most of you board members know that when you're done with the board, you don't ever want to be on it again or even go to a meeting. So that knowledge goes away. And unfortunately, in our industry, the truth of the matter is that managers, especially portfolio managers, only last in the industry an average of about 4 years. That's up from what it used to be.
Wow.
Yeah. Portfolio work. Yeah.
Wow.
That's it. 4 years. So it used to be 18 months, but we've come away from that a little bit. And so you lose that institutional knowledge. So if someone managed your account for 3 or 4 years, if you were that fortunate, once they take off, they may not have left any notes because it's all in their head. So that's one of the big problems we have. That's an issue, is the institutional knowledge. So if you board members, the treasurer, finance committee, and managers, if you guys would just keep some form of notes, and I don't mean it has to be big, but some, just putting a note in the file, and I'm talking electronic files, note in the file of this is what happened and this is why we had to do this. That might serve you well for each community, and if you could, it's almost like a turnover file for your board, for the new board, or for a new manager. It would be that would be perfect, but it's not, and unfortunately it's just something we deal with. One of the other big issues, of course, we have is not planning ahead. And that's assigning projects, especially in the budgeting process, without deadlines. So if you're the treasurer of an association and say you're the head of the finance committee and the manager's giving you a preliminary budget and you get it and you send it to the finance committee and you say, hey, Bob Smith on the finance committee, you need to call the landscape company and see if they can sharpen their pencil a little bit. Well, you know what? You got to follow up with Bob Smith, because Bob may be all thrilled about his golf game, or he may have left the country. You don't know. Follow up with him. Give him a deadline. And you managers, you have to give the treasurer a deadline. So that means you need to just continually, gently push everybody forward. Manager to treasurer, treasurer to finance committee member, or however you have it set up. Following up is a huge issue. An unsuccessful delegation will bite you every time. Managers, truly it falls to you more than anyone else. And of course, the lack of a reserve study is probably one of the biggest ones. I'm going to let Robert take it away.
Well, what we find is that reserve contributions are typically 15 to 40% of an association's total budget. So it's a very large budget line item, and for many associations, it's the largest budget line item. So it's important to have that fresh information so the board can, as Julie's been talking about, make fresh, real-time decisions about what the needs of the association are, what needs to happen, and going back a little bit of the communication, building some political capital and showing openness. So here we are, let's see, it's summertime here when we're doing the webinar, so maybe publicizing that the pool furniture, we've got one more year with this pool furniture, we're going to get a new set next year, and then publicizing that you're going to get a new roof in 2 years, but just being able to promote and communicate what's going on and have fresh information so you're able to have a good plan on process, and so the board can make the financial course corrections, those adjustments, again, that Julie was talking about earlier. Are you still on pace to be ready for that big roof project in 5 years, or the painting project, or whatever is big at your association, maybe an elevator modernization? Those big projects take many years of preparation, and you want to make sure that you're prepared. So just want to put in a little plug here. There's many states that have minimum standards, and please be reminded that those are minimum standards. For doing a reserve study with a site inspection maybe every 3rd year or every 5th year, those are just basic minimum standards. 3 years is a long time, 5 years is a long time to allow an association to get off course. What we find is that associations that are failing to do annual reserve planning, failing to update their numbers, have a 35% higher chance of a special assessment. Let me say that a different way. Special assessments are 35% more frequent among associations that ignore their reserve update for years at a time. And so that's just a helpful hint that we want to suggest, tell you about, and avoid that problem of just relaxing and sitting back and only doing your budget planning, significant reserve budget planning every 3rd or every 5th year.
And we can go back to, or I'm sorry, let's head on to a couple of helpful hints. Do we have want to go up with that, Robert?
Well, let's wrap up this problem section. The wrong goal is what? Trying to minimize assessments or trying to keep dues, homeowner assessments low. Forgetfulness, whether it's the board or the manager, just not learning the lessons of the past. Lack of foresight, where they're unaware or just pretending, crossing their fingers that it's all going to go smooth. Unsuccessful delegation kind of goes with number 3, where the manager may delegate to the treasurer, but if the manager doesn't delegate successfully in enough time, aware that the treasurer is going to go for a month somewhere else, or that everything's got a bump in the road, nothing ever goes exactly according to plan, or just not having fresh information for one of your largest budget line items. All those are major problems. There's obviously other problems, but these are the ones that came to our mind when we were preparing for this webinar that we want to share with you. Don't make these big mistakes. Okay, let's move the topic, point of conversation away from what to avoid to the helpful hints. So Julie, give us a rundown on some of your helpful hints.
Well, I'm sorry I got a little ahead of myself previously. However, number one thing to do is focus on the goal. And what is the goal? The goal is to have a cash positive budget. And you have to create some margin within that budget for unexpected things that happen. And I don't care how well we manage our communities as a board, as the paid management staff, it doesn't matter, something unexpected always pops up. And the next thing to me that is the biggest, and I'm going to spend a little bit of time on this, is communication. Communicate early, and often to the homeowners. Why? Because when you don't communicate with them, some owners out there are suspicious of you no matter what you do.
What do you mean some owners?
But you know, if there's an information vacuum, believe me, that vacuum will fill with disinformation and rabble-rousing. If you're not filling that vacuum with good, solid information, it will be filled with something else, something you don't want it filled with. So, positive communication to your owners. This is what we're looking at. This is what it's costing. This is what it cost last year. This is where we're going. And yes, next year we're going to replace the pool furniture. When you start communicating a lot, and I mean on a monthly basis in your newsletter or on your website or however you are doing it, even at your board meetings, or especially at your board meetings, but that's usually a smaller audience, this creates it's a culture of openness. And board members, I know everyone kind of gets hunkered down because it's always an us versus them type of relationship with your owners. You're doing it for them, but it is kind of us versus them. But the more open you are, the more transparent you are, the more you create this culture where you are appearing and are confident of your decisions, confident of your management of the community, and you project competence to the homeowners. It doesn't happen overnight, but the more you do this on an ongoing basis, month to month and year to year, the owners have a tendency to relax because they're like, oh, we're in good hands. We like what they're doing. They're letting us know what they're doing. We've seen the financial statements. We understand it. So that's a very positive communication about your financial issues is really, really important.
You got me taking notes again.
Well, just keep taking, right? Keep writing.
That's why I'm busy.
I know. You notice he's not typing, otherwise we'd be hearing it. Okay, and you know what? And everyone remember, your budgeting is really a year-round process. I mean, I say start your budgets in July, but for you managers, especially you folks who've been doing it for over 5 years, 8 years, 10 years, or past that, you classic managers who've been doing it as long as I have been doing it, you know budgeting is a year-round process. You look at it, like I said before, you wear it like a hair shirt. You wear it on your hip. It's with you all the time. Your budget's for your communities. It's a year-round process. Observe what's going on, understand what needs to be adjusted, make notes on what you think needs to be adjusted, keep a file on budget notes for each community. I mean an electronic file, or you can keep a handwritten file if you want. So that's really important for the managers, and for the board members, this is really, really important. You have to take a long view, a multi-year perspective, if you will. And why is that? Even though you are only on your board or on the board for 2 years, maybe 4 years, 6 or 8 years, 10 years if you're nuts, but if you're only on the board for 2 years, you still have to understand that what you're doing today affects the community 5 or 8 years down the road. And if 10 years worth of board members only look at it 1 or 2 years at a time, the board members that come in 10 or 12 years from now are left holding the bag. It's like that game. What's that game you play when you're a kid where the music plays?
Musical chairs.
Yes, and if you're the board, if I'm speaking to a board member right now who is the one left standing, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You don't want to be the guy left standing, and if you're on that board who is just looking at 2 years, look out and see what's going to happen 10 years down the road. 10 years down the road.
Yeah. Can I pop in here for just a moment?
Yeah, please.
The association started before you were on the board, or worked as a manager for the association. The association will be there after you're off the board or when you're no longer managing the association. And you have to see yourself as being a link in the chain from a successful past or whatever past they had to a successful future. You don't want to be dropping the ball or just kicking the can down the road. You want to be a successful link in the chain. And for many associations that we see from a reserve study point of view, we see them in the current situation with poor reserves, and we understand that. But we counsel them, it took years, maybe even decades to get to this situation. Don't feel the burden of trying to get instantly to a position of reserve fund strength. What we talk about is we articulate the $10 solution, where whatever your reserve contributions are now, per owner, add $10 next year. So if your homeowner assessments are $250 a month, go $260. Put that extra 10 straight into reserves. Whatever it is, add $10 to reserves per unit per month this year, and then do it again next year, do it again the year after. Most associations in this country would be successfully funding their reserves if they took 3, 4, 5 years on this $10 a month program, finally start contributing enough to reserves, and they would get themselves out of the jam that they're in. You don't have to fix a multi-year or a multi-decade problem overnight. It's usually okay to take a few years, but you gotta step down that path.
That's right. That's absolutely right. One more thing, Robert, before we go, I wanted to, well, two things actually I wanted to talk about real quickly, and this is, I'm just going to say it again. For all you board members out there, you have to deal with the truth of the financial state your community is in. If your community has fully funded reserves, if you have money left over every year, well then maybe you don't need to maybe you don't need to raise assessments. But I would say, I'm not talking to one person out there who has that situation in their community. Most communities are underfunded and run very, very close to the wire or even under the wire yearly. Deal with the truth. This is real-time information, real-time boots on the ground, real-time what things cost every single day in your community. You got to deal with it. Not dealing with it doesn't do you any good. And Robert, why don't you talk about deferred maintenance and having to do with real time?
Certainly. The big decision or the big mistake that we see associations making that I want to help you avoid today is understanding that deferred maintenance isn't a delay of a large expense. It often ends up being an increase in the expense. We see that so often with roofing, where you might delay it a year, and all of a sudden, in addition to a new roof, you have repair expenses and water damage expenses. With asphalt, instead of a nice nominal seal coat expense, if you wait a year or two, you start getting significantly expensive crack repairs, maybe even resurfacing. Basically, the point I want to make is that you need to spend the money at the right time to maintain the association. Don't make the mistake of thinking that if you wait, you're saving money, because most associations that do that wait and they end up costing the association more money, and they end up bleeding reserves, and that's just so sad to see that happen.
Yeah, bleeding reserves and having to increase assessments 20% and then do a special assessment on top of it, or get a loan or get a loan.
Right, all because they didn't have that courage to be, as I think you said, real-time budgets, real-time decisions, looking at the truth of the matter and making the nominal annual increases to stay on top and give the association the cash it needs to run.
That's right. And budgeting for the group, budgeting for the community as a whole, not worrying about I know they're difficult, but not worrying about that 10% vocal minority that always has a microscope, looking up everything that you do. How is this? How is that? That's not who you're budgeting for. You're budgeting for the community as a whole. You're a trustee. You're a fiduciary. And the membership as a whole is trusting you to do the right thing.
Yeah, don't bring the association down for someone, a vocal person on a fixed income, because your job is to run the association for the majority of owners. You're supposed to run the institution of the association, and you may have to face the reality that there are a few people, it may be 1%, it may be 5%, or maybe just one or two individuals that they no longer really fit as a member of that community.
And that's true, and that's a hard thing to say, and it's a hard thing to talk about, but living in a community association of any type, it's not any different in that sense than living in a single-family home. I live in a 3,000 square foot house on an acre out in the country. We take care of all of it ourselves. I have chickens, for heaven's sakes.
That's a lot of work.
It is a lot of work, but you know what? There's going to come a point where my husband and I can no longer do this, so then we're going to have to pay more to have someone take care of it. or we can decide to leave this to downsize. The same thing happens in homeowners associations. Because someone moved into an HOA in 1995 and can no longer afford it in 2016, is it sad? Yes. But is it reality? It is. Just as if you were moving out of your large single-family home when all the kids were here and you had to have this big house, but all of a sudden you realize, one, I can't take care of it, and two, I can't afford it.
Yeah.
And you don't think anything about that.
Exactly. You don't want to run the association for the two remaining original owners from 1985 who like everything the way it was, who are dragging the place down when the majority of owners really want this to be a nice place to live. And it's just a difficult decision to make, but sometimes people have to face the fact, and board members need to face the fact that there are some people that need to move, and they just need to run the association for the majority of homeowners. Well, the helpful hints we had here that we wanted to summarize: focus on the goal, which is providing enough cash for the association to operate. And my little tip on that is it's often that last $5 or $10 that make all the difference. They give you the margin to be able to run the association not just successfully, but with a little bit of enjoyment, to make it the community that people can enjoy. Communicate what's going on. Julie, I think, called it a year-long process, and it goes right in line with start early. Have that multi-year perspective. The association was there before you. It'll be there after you. Make sure you're a good trustee or fiduciary along the process. Deal with the truth of the matter, the numbers, the roof, the landscaper, the utility bills. They're all the truth of the matter. You might as well be dealing with the truth of the matter. And budget for the majority. Your responsibility is to the association, not one or two, can I say it, annoying, counterproductive?
Challenging.
There we go. That's a little nicer word. So before I start picking even more inappropriate words, I want to let you know that we've enjoyed this time here. There's only so much time that we have, and there's only so much we can do in the amount of time that we've taken for this webinar. I want to thank you for joining us. I want to point you to a couple of very significant resources here. First is Julie's website, adameninc.com, where you can sign up for her valuable newsletter. I enjoy it. I look forward to it. Lots of rich information about the kind of work she does, helpful tips, all about the consulting services she offers for management companies and associations on a variety of operational and, you can probably imagine, communication issues. She's a savant in this field, really a treasure. And then the Association Reserves website, we've been doing this long enough. We have a deep resource in our Learning Center. Obviously there at reservesday.com you can request a proposal. You can join our email list where we have time-saving tips. We have helpful hints on what word selection to use when you're dealing with potential budget increases, even special assessments, helping the owners to get on the same page. So lots of tools for success. Again, Julie and I have done this a long time. We've been around the block a time or two. We want to be your guide to a successful future. So on behalf of both of us, we want to thank you for joining us today. I hope that you've picked up a few gems. I think I mentioned it while Julie was talking. I'm jotting down notes that I can share with other people. A few choice words, turn of a phrase. We want you to move towards a peaceful and productive future at your association. So with that, I'll turn the microphone over to Paige, who will coordinate our Q&A time with the amount of time we have remaining in the program. Paige.
Thank you, Robert and Julie.